Shabbat Shalom. In this week's Prshat Baha'alotcha, we have two stories about the people complaining. Very often in the Torah, there are two stories on a similar theme that are presented one after the other, and sometimes it's possible by looking at them together to get some lessons out of it. I'll see if we can do that today. The first one is only takes up only 3 psukim, 3 verses. The Torah doesn't even tell us what the complaint was. It says "Vayam kimit onanim." This kid is as if they were complaining. The Ramban tells us that they were sort of muttering under their breath. They weren't complaining out loud. They were just sort of mumbling to themselves how tough it was. And the Ramban goes on to say that this happened immediately after the revelation at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. They left their camp there and were setting out into this very harsh desert. And some people were sort of muttering under their breaths, how are we going to make it here? The Torah tells us that God was displeased, and Vatochal b'ktzei machane, he made some sort of punishment, but only b'ktzei machane, at the edge of the camp. Rashi brings us 2 interesting opinions. One, that it's the bottom edge, that is the lower riffraff levels, who presumably were the ones who were complaining, and the other that it was the top edge, the Ketzinim, who had to take responsibility for this. And then Moshe prayed, and the event ended. Very short episode, and that's all the Torah has to tell us about it. Well, the second story is much, much longer and much more detailed. The Torah tells us who the complainers were. It was this Asaf Suf, this riffraff, this rabble, apparently people who were escaped slaves, people who had sort of taken advantage of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt to run away from their masters or run away from whatever they were running away from. But their complaint caught on among the Jews. The Torah tells us great details about their complaint. That the complaint was that the menu was not rich enough, was not variegated enough, was not interesting enough. If we take the Ramban, but the Torah doesn't tell us, as I said, what the first story, what the complaint was, but if the complaint was, what are we going to eat? Here, there was no question what they're going to eat, because in this story, the Torah gives us the most detailed account it has of the man, of what the man was like, and how how it was prepared when it came, what it tasted like. So we have no problem with regard to what they had no problem with what they're going to eat. They were just complaining that they wanted a richer, more interesting, more stimulating menu with vegetables of all sorts and so on and so forth. Now, I should also add that the Midrash tells us, the Torah hints that their complaints were not limited to food. They were also concerned with other bodily urges which they felt they were not given the opportunity to fulfill. It's interesting that their complaint, as I said, is that they remember all the vegetables and the greens that they had in Egypt. But when Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Hashem, he understands the complaint to be that they want meat. Now this complaint, which seems to be developing into almost a full-scale revolt, leads to a great crisis for Moshe, and it has 2 aspects. One is the how we're going to answer the demand for meat, but also Moshe at this time almost breaks down and says, I just can't handle this by myself. Remember that in Parshat Yitro, Moshe felt that he could be the entire judiciary himself. There was no need for any other judges. He would sit there by himself and adjudicate all the cases that the Bnei Israel had until his father-in-law told him, that you just can't do that. It's more than one person can handle. Now Moshe Rabbeinu admits that he can't handle this himself, and these are the two things that come up in his discussion with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. How am I going to feed them? How am I going to find meat for all these people out here in the desert? And I just can't, deal with this myself anymore. So, as I said, we know the story develops. The 70 leaders, the 70 elders, play no role at all, not even asked, as far as we know from what the Torah tells us, to do something to rein in the people. A huge flock of slav, quail, or whatever they are, come in. The people, how many exactly, we don't know, just fall upon it the way they did in the scene from Goodbye Columbus, if you remember that, where they fell upon the chopped liver and gorged themselves to death, basically. And the Torah sums up by saying, this is called Kivrot Ta'ava, the graves of, ravenous appetite. Kisham Kavru et ha'am hamitavim. There they buried the people who had this ravenous appetite, but just the ha'am hamitavim. Of course, many people survived. I like to think that there were a good number of people who took seriously what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, V'tkadashtem lamachar. They spent all night thinking about, do they really want, is meat all that important to them? They're not starving. They have the man. They want to, ruin everything just for, a piece of meat. And they decided not to touch it. And this is how, free will plays itself out, at least in some way. The moral of the story is that, when you're given it the choice to think about it, take advantage of it, think about it, and make the right decision. We cannot understand God's ways. God's ways of running the world, God's thoughts of being a speaker of that are something that we can't comprehend, and we shouldn't, have to saying that talk as if we can comprehend it. We can't. But what we can do, and what we must do, is choose the right thing to do. And here the right thing to do was to decide that we're not going to touch the meat, and let's hope that we all have the strength and the foresight to make the proper decisions in life. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.